you with. And one of those things that we've been saddled with because of how God made us is grief. The pain of loss. I was in a discussion the other day with someone, and the statement was made that it appears that someone has died or gone on in a story that is being written. And I said, why would you assume that? I said, how do you know the person's just didn't leave? She said, because of the grief. I said, well, you can have grief in different fashions. You can grieve over losing a job you've had for a long time. You can grieve over your circumstances. You can grieve. Loss comes in many ways. A loss of joy, a loss of hope can usher in the need to grieve. When someone is just not around, you know, for instance, the mother's son that goes away to the military and doesn't come home for about a year or so, the mother will find herself, and the brothers or sisters may find themselves missing that person. Because they're not so much that y'all did everything together, but their presence is no longer there. It ushers in the spirit of grief. We're not alone in these things. But I want you to know something, that God didn't give us something that he couldn't promptly bring us out of. He didn't give us the emotional base that allows us to grieve, knowing that if we grieve too much, we won't be any good to nothing, for nothing. So he put in place a comforter. The comforter that Jesus spoke of is more than just to give you the spirit of truth, to teach you things. But it's about being able to comfort you, because in war, you're going to lose somebody. In war, you're going to miss opportunity. I've talked to a lot of people, and it used to be said years ago when people would come home from overseas and you'd ask them, what do you miss most? And they say a hamburger. Now you can get a hamburger around the world. It used to be, what did you miss most when you was over there? I missed mama's enchiladas. Well, you can get enchiladas all over the world now. You can get chickpea soup over here in America now. Goat meat, falafel, hummus. There was a time when you couldn't. But when we look at grief and the effects it has on us, it affects each one of us differently. I don't know about you, but I miss my family. I grieve for them oft. But I can't hang my hat on grief. And I want to encourage you today that if you have experienced loss of a relationship, loss of a pet, loss of a loved one, or you grieve the presence of someone or a custom that you were used to. You know, you can miss mama's Thanksgiving dinner sometimes when you're not around. Not that mama ain't alive, and not that she's not fixing Thanksgiving, but you had to go to work in a different land. And you can grieve that smell, that camaraderie, that family, that familiarity of smells and tastes and laughter. Sometimes you might even grieve the loss of a good argument over a football game, baseball game. The grief of no longer being in love with your husband or your wife. That you can grieve for that touch or that smell. Your siblings, you can grieve for them as well. But I want to draw your attention to specifically, I'm going to touch on a couple of things and then we're going to get out of here. Is that all right? I want to direct your attention, first of all, to chapter 43 of the book of Genesis. And while you're looking for it, I'm going to give you a couple of definitions. Grief. Keen mental suffering or distress over affliction or loss. Sharp sorrow. Painful regret. That's what grief is. You remember how it used to be said of Dr. Schultz's cartoon character, Charlie Brown. There was this phrase that they used to say, good grief, Charlie Brown. Based on what I've just read in the dictionary, it says keen mental suffering or distress over affliction or loss, sharp sorrow, painful regret. Ain't no good in that, or so it seems. Y'all there? Look with me at verse 29. And the word of God reads, and he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, is this your younger brother, of whom you spake unto me? And he said, God be gracious unto thee, my son. And Joseph made haste, for his bowels did yearn upon his brother. And he sought where to weep. And he entered into his chamber and wept there. And he washed his face and went out. And refrained himself and said, set on bread. And they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, and for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination unto the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one at another. And he took and sent messes unto them from before him, but Benjamin's mess was 5 times so much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. You may be seated. I want to talk to you about grief among merriment. Grief among merriment. Merriment is M-E-R-R-I-M-E-N-T. Grief among merriment. That means you and nobody knows. There's a song and a saying, nobody knows the troubles I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Yeah, have you ever felt like that? You were in a crowded room all alone. You ever lose somebody close to you and wonder why everybody around you is smiling and laughing, and don't they understand what you've lost? Everybody's not going to understand what you've lost when you lose it. But Joseph has a story to tell us. Joseph lost his position in family because he not only boasted of himself, but he just simply talked too much. And these same men that sat before him now, save Benjamin, decided that they couldn't tolerate Joseph anymore. He just thought he was too much. He is young, and daddy made him a coat, Millie colors. And he just think he all that in a bag of chips. He gets on my nerve. Y'all know y'all gonna bow down to me. Yeah, because I had a dream, and y'all know y'all going to do this, and y'all going to do this, and I'm going to be, yeah, See, because we've seen it. We've seen it before. Remember when all the youngest seemed to rule over everybody? Yeah, I'm the youngest, ha. So they decided to pretend to have killed him, man, but they didn't. They took him out of where they put him, and they sold him into slavery. One thing led to another. The story that Joseph leaves with us is one of many sorrows, but godly triumph. There was grief in the face of merriment. It's not always delightful to one's soul when your heart has been pricked like that. My mother one day was sitting in her dining room and in her living room some years ago. I had not even met my wife then. And I walked in, and she had a solemn look on her face, and her eyes were wet with tears. And I knew of no such tragedy that could have brought this on, but being that was my mother, I wanted to know what was wrong. I said, Mama, you all right? She said, yeah. I said, well, you don't look all right. What's wrong? She said, you know, Terry, my mother's been dead for over 30 years. And I wanted to call her today. Grief. Grief. Sometimes it dissipates to a point where you no longer feel it and you can function. And then sometimes it shows up again. Joseph was consequently bought and taken to Egypt. We know the story. He was accused of having raped his master's wife. He was imprisoned for over 12 years for a crime he didn't commit. I remember getting whoopings for things I didn't do just because somebody said I did it. You ever been in trouble like that? You can grieve for justice. You can grieve for release in those circumstances. You grieve to find understanding in those dark places. Why am I being treated thusly? I've done nothing wrong. You ever say that before? So Joseph's tale goes that the king called him one day because he heard something about Joseph. And he brought him out. And Joseph, being led by God, get your hand out of that bowl, JJ. Y'all should have seen what I just said. He wanted his freedom, but Joseph wanted God more. He wanted his dignity that had been stolen from him out of the mouths and actions of others. But Joseph maintained his integrity. You know, grief will push you to the brink of your integrity. Grief and sharp sorrow can make you wish you were like the ones that inflicted pain on you so you can get them back. You know what I'm talking about? They hurt me, so I'm going to hurt them back. I'm going to be nasty to them too, because the way they don't have to be that way. Well, so why are you trying to be like them? What does it mean to grieve? To grieve means to feel grief on great sorrow or great sorrow. An example, she has grieved over his death for nearly 3 years. My mother grieved over her mother's death for over 30 years. Indeed, I would believe for much longer than that. If you've never lost a loved one, as a mom, a dad, a grandmother, or a grandfather, or a sibling, or a child, it's hard to fathom such loss. But once time steps in on your grief, you realize how permanent it is. Unchangeable it is. Such is time upon the body, upon the mind, and upon the actions of men. And we grieve. You see the old men walking and talking or sitting on the porch, sharing lemonade, reminiscing. The reminiscence is not so much that of great sorrow, but of bygone days when they once ran like the hart and leapt like the deer and could swim like the dolphin and climb like monkeys and eat like they were the most ravished of soldiers. But now the stomach ain't so big. The legs don't move quite as fast. The strength isn't there to leap that high anymore. And the idea of climbing a 10-foot ladder don't look so appealing. And we grieve for what we once were. We reminisce and we talk to others and we tell young people, I remember when I could slam dunk. I remember when this, and I remember when me and the wife could dance the night away. Now, our night away ends at 8:30 or 9. You remember those days? Hayward could tell you, I remember when this brother could eat a whole pack of hot dogs and look at you like you full already when you had your second one. Can't do it anymore. Joseph was in a situation where he couldn't go back home to daddy right now. He couldn't go back and recount the events to his dad, what his brothers did, and how he boasted of his exaltation that was yet to be, and he couldn't go and run to mama and plead his cause. He couldn't go before Pharaoh 12 years ago and find justice. Nevertheless, in spite of all the grief that he felt, in this instant we read about, it floats a little bit. I mean, it comes to the top. You know the story. He gains prominence in Egypt. He becomes somebody now. And his dreams begin to unfold as he's not only feeding all the nations that are around him, but his own brothers that sold him into slavery, caused him to be arrested. He's now being asked to feed them. The same one that made the coat of many colors sent the boys to go get him, to go get some food. He didn't know where Joseph was. He thought Joseph was dead. And in his mind, his dad had grieved for years. But to his delight, Joseph found out he had a little brother. Dad must have been doing something. So he said, is he still alive? Yeah. He said, yeah, how? And so when they came back, he sent them, and then he sent them again and said, now bring me the youngest boy. So here we are. Joseph's story is one that lacks revenge. There's no vengeance in this thing. I looked for it, but I can't find vengeance. Grief sometimes will try to take you in the closet of vengeance and help you plot out something to plead your cause, to minimize the pain. I'm going to tell you something, vengeance don't minimize pain. I'm going to get you back, don't take away the grief. I'm going to give you a piece of my mind is not going to quench the fires of your sorrow. Only God sent somebody else to do that. And we can count on him. But in this moment where they bring him back, his brothers was a little nervous because Joseph had put a little bit of something on them that they wasn't expecting. Y'all remember the story? And said, we don't know how this got here. Reuben, did you steal? How did this get here? Which one of y'all stole this? So when they brought Benjamin back, they thought he was going to kill Benjamin. They thought he had vengeance on his mind. And they pleaded, don't hurt him, kill us. Kill one of us. Y'all know the story? He said, don't touch the lad. My dad, he'll die. He'll grieve until his death. He won't be able to deal with this. He already lost one young son. He already lost. You mean he still miss me? Can you hear Joseph in his mind saying he still miss me? He don't know I'm alive. And now I got a little brother from the same mom and dad. So here we are. When he saw his little brother whom he's never laid eyes on, and his little brother has never laid eyes on him, I'm sure he heard the tales of how he was probably eaten by lions or whatever. He was stolen in the middle of the night, or he ran away from home because some little hottail that lived in the next house and the tent down the road got him, blew his mind or something. Because Benjamin didn't know the truth. He just was going along with what he heard. He heard he was dead. Verse 29 says when they walk into the room, the Bible says he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin. My mother couldn't lift up her eyes and see her mother. I can't lift up my eyes and see my mother except for photographs. I can't see Linda. I can't see Karen or Leah. Daryl, David, Johnny, George, Pat, Florine, Mabel. I can't see them anymore. I'll never smell them again. Hear their laughter. See them weep for someone else. Eat at supper with them. Because this thing called time has a supplemental assurance that if you live long enough, it's going to take you. Huh? So we grieve, and I've grieved, but it's to whom do we shout? To whom do we weep? And where's our hope for relief? He said he saw his brother, and he made haste. He had to hurry up and get out the room. It's almost like throwing up when you're pregnant and you're in a restaurant and you got to puke. You make haste to get to the bathroom. Am I right? You ladies know. I ain't never been pregnant. Y'all got to tell me. I'm just a witness. I've seen it. You know how it is. And it's almost, you know how you got to hurry up and gain relief from that thing. I remember being so sick, I almost stood 3 feet from the toilet, and I watched it myself make a slam dunk it into the bathroom, man. You know how you, and it just, oh, thank you. I don't have to clean it up. Sorrow can be like that. It can grip your heart, it can grip your mind, it can grip your progress, and it can cause you to want to do nothing but curl up and cry. Why me, Lord? How could you do this? Ever been there? How could he do this? How could you do this? Where did they go? Where did he go? Why did mine have to die? Such is time. But this was a different kind of grief. This was a different type of sorrow. I can imagine that in looking at his child, at his youngest brother, he's probably thinking, what must it be like to still have daddy? What must it be like to be able to let daddy hold her? I remember those days. I remember being you. He had to leave the room because his throat got tight. Your throat get tight sometime. Sorrow upon sorrow. Seemed like I remember once, one of my cousins, George, he had been sick. And George fell dead. He was walking when he died. He had been very sick. And as far as what I'm told, George one night he was one of my older cousins. George got out of the bed one night. And he wanted to get up. For whatever reason, they said he got up out of the bed and walked in the living room, and he was dead before he hit the floor. I was asked to do his services. I was young in ministry. The ministry was young, I should say. And the morning that I was to go and do George's service, I got a phone call. And my wife said, Terence is for you, baby. It's Leah. And I said, yeah, what's going on? And she was crying. And she said, Kathy died this morning. I said, Kathy who? She said, our cousin, Kathy Shepherd. I looked at the phone. You know how you look at something like that tastes good? You taste so good you look at it. Or somebody says something marvelous and you look at the phone like, what? Well, I looked at the phone. I said, well, I just talked to her. I prayed with her less than a week ago in her mother's house. And there she's gone this morning. So I had to go say bye to one cousin while waiting to have to say goodbye to another cousin. I've kept so much grief. I remember my wife would tell you, I was losing cousins. My sister died. My father-in-law died, and so forth and so on. It seemed like it started just happening. And the grief was so overwhelming that I understand Joseph's. Joseph's was a joyful grief. He was sorrowful because he had to keep himself concealed just a little while longer. He wanted to just hug on him and kiss on him, and he was sorry he couldn't do it right now because he had some business to tend to. Y'all read the story. But the Bible tells me that he made haste. And his body was beginning to your body can feel grief. Yeah, your body can feel grief. That's why when you see people, they've lost a loved one or something like that, they get weak at the knees. Their body's responding to the weight of the grief, the sorrow, the pain of it, the anguish of it all that seems so unrelenting. But Jesus has a way. Ain't that something? The knowledge that God has of who he created and how he created us makes it possible for us to have such great pain and realize that we still can go on. Only God could do that. God built us that way. Joseph, he goes and he gets alone and he weeps. He weeps. And when he wept, can you hear him crying? How he must have just had to relieve that weight so that he can continue his business. He went alone and he just wept. And he was thankful. I can hear him saying, thank you for letting me see him. I remember I couldn't see my sons for years. When me and my first wife were separated, my little boy, my oldest son, I think he was about 7 or 8 years old. He just got married last month, and he's 43. But we lived in Alabama. And every now and then that grief would take hold of me. The grief of not